Hello and welcome back to World of Warcraft and another challenge mode dungeon run. My name's Lumin and right now, Gold Run, Shado-Pan Monastery. This was one of the easier instances for us to complete, but at the same time, it was also very difficult to learn everything in it. Although the mechanics and stuff weren't that complicating, although the bosses weren't that hard, there's just a lot. Because it's so long, because it's over 20 minutes long, you end up sometimes doing incredibly well like halfway through, and then like 3/4 of the way through you make a mistake, then you don't get to see the end because you want to reset, you want to start again because you think to yourself, well, you can do it, you're gonna get that gold time, then you end up not practicing the end of the instance, then when you finally get there, then you don't know what to do. You make a mistake there, gotta start again, same thing, over and over. And if I had to give you one piece of advice with this one, take your time, do it at least a couple of times all the way through, and then only start going for time. It's better that way. It really is. Now, there are a whole bunch of bosses. You can see on the side there, Goo Cloud Strike, Master Snowdrift, Shah of Violence, Terran Zoo, and then there's still 32 enemies and 4 Defenders Purified. The Defenders Purified are all the way at the end. You'll see them when we get to them. Our team for this run consisted of me, a Protection Paladin, Zohee, a Discipline Priest, Jemma, a Frost Mage, Safflower, a Destruction Warlock, and then Vorash switched between Demonology and Destruction quite a lot, so I'm not even sure what he was playing in this one. I know, for instance, in Scholarmance he was playing Demonology, but I think at this point already he was playing Destruction, he had switched over, I don't know. On to the actual run. When we start this off, this first pull is probably the most difficult one for us in the entire instance. I don't know why it's always the first pull, but I guess this one specifically, you kind of have to pull them all at the same time just to make the AoE worth it, to make using AoE worth it. But because of the Stormbringers here channeling this lightning orb in the middle, you constantly get stunned if you in their, let's just say, area, their direct vicinity. So I made a mistake and kept running up and down there and I kept getting stunned. And I think for a tank specifically, there's just a lot of damage that you got to work through here. You gotta use your cooldowns. You see I used Ardent Defender and Guardian of Ancient Kings here. There's a lot of incoming damage, and if your party members, if your DPS actually do the damage they're meant to be doing, it can be a little bit difficult holding aggro on all of them. But I mean, you get those stacks of vengeance, and because of that, you do a lot of damage yourself, so you generally under control there. It's difficult. When you get past that pull, things do go a little easier. Now, Goo Cloud Strike, he's a pretty simple boss once you've got the mechanics down, once you know what he's gonna do. I think that we did not even wipe on this once. It was just kind of easy. What he does is he invokes lightning, which is, if I'm not mistaken, just a lightning bolt. And then he puts static fields down randomly. And because of the static fields, you gotta, 1, keep moving, and 2, spread out if you're a ranged DPS so that if it goes on you, then you don't put other people in harm's way. The static fields come from the Azure Serpent that's hovering up in the air behind him, and you can see our DPS constantly have to move around, and you can see that I take a lot of damage here. Once you get him just below 50%, then you gotta switch to the Azure Serpent that's hovering in the sky back there, and you'll put all your DPS on the one side of the platform and your tank on the other side, so that the DPS don't get hit, and the healer, obviously, by the lightning breath. Otherwise, however, this is incredibly straightforward. That's it. That's all that really gets done here. You gotta watch out for the lightning breath, and if you stand on the right side, then there's really nothing to worry about. Once you take down the Azure Serpent, which is also not that difficult, and we did it here with the help of Time Warp. This is where we decided to use our Time Warp. And if you do use Time Warp here, you get to use it kind of selectively later on because the instance is so long. You can see we've still got 18 minutes on the timer. But once you take down the Azure Serpent, then you're going to switch back to Goo Cloud Strike, and then it becomes a straight-up DPS and I guess healing race as well, where your healer is going to stress the heck out because there's so much incoming damage. Perfect time for Power Word Barrier, as you can see, but obviously not the best time to not stand in the Power Word Barrier, as some of our DPS are, in fact, doing. Anyway. Good time for Power Word Barrier. You should probably stack, use all those cooldowns, and just DPS the boss down as quick as you possibly can, because obviously it's not going to be something you can heal through forever. It is a straight up DPS race. He does damage, you do damage. The one who does more wins. Now when you move on into the next room, there are a couple of little Shahs here that do quite a lot of damage, and you're going to want to pull them all together, or at least sort of all together, but the way you kill them is not by AoEing, because if you AoE them down and they all die at the same time, you'll see how it can be bad for you. Now, I just took it slow at the start so that everyone could get back up on their feet, everyone could heal up, get their mana ready, and then I just gathered the rest of them up. Now, you do AoE here, but then you single target them down. You can see I put a skull on the one, I put an X on the other one. That's obviously first target, second target, and you take them down single target because they do a Shah Nova when they die that does a ton of damage. Now, you can interrupt it. You can even interrupt the Shah Blasts that they do, which are basically like Mind Blasts. You can interrupt those. It works. But it probably makes more sense just DPS them down as fast as possible so that when they try cast the Shah Nova, it doesn't even really go off. Not a difficult pack to pull, not a difficult pack to deal with. They can do some damage, but if you use your cooldowns and your stuns and your disables and stuff effectively here, it's not a problem. Once you take the Ethereal Shard down, this next part is, well, possible to do in different ways. I was in a group before where one DPS didn't even partake in killing the Ethereal Shard. They just ran out the door and immediately mounted up, ran to the other side, and quickly stopped these archers from firing, because that's how it works. Basically, one person needs to get to the other side of these bridges, then the archers on the rooftops will disappear, and everyone else can just run straight through. You'll see there, they disappeared. Safflower nearly died. It's kind of close there. And once you get in this room, the RP event in the room starts up, much like in the Heroic Dungeon. You know, there's a bit of yak from Master Snowdrift, and then the students, the novices, jump on in here. This is the most annoying part of the instance by far, because, well, it's impossible to wipe here. It's kind of easy. I suppose there's quite a bit of healing to do, but these novices don't do much damage, and it just takes super long. Like super long. And you can see on the right hand side of the screen there, we've already got 29 out of 32 enemies killed. That's a lot. It's not like we're going to struggle finding enemies to kill, so we actually have the luxury of skipping a couple in just a little bit, you'll see. But in this arena, all you gotta do is try and kill them as quick as possible. It does actually matter. I mean, if you kill them quicker, then more of them will spawn quicker, and the whole event will be done quicker. It's usually not super effective using mass AoE here, but if you can get them clumped up, which is, you know, something that happens every now and then you can use a Shadow Fury or some other AoE stun to just knock them down, and then use some AoE on them. I'd say if you can get more than 2 or 3, probably 3 plus in an area, like we have right here now, then it's worth using your AoE spells. Otherwise, it's not really. Just because you could probably do more single target, or you should probably be doing more single target. But once you take the novices down, then you're going to have 2 mini bosses. You'll see they'll come out in just a moment or two when we finish taking these out. As a tank, you don't really have much to do here. I mean, you're running around like a fool, trying to stun, trying to disable, trying to do a little bit of damage, trying to be useful. That's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to be useful, because you can't taunt these things. I think if you do taunt them, and I did it a couple of times, if you do taunt them, then they literally attack you for a split second. Then they just move on to the next target. These guys just run around like headless chickens. That's it. That's pretty much all they do. Now, we've taken them down. Another little bit of RP. Sadly, you can't skip any of this at all. Snowdrift just seems to have a lot to say. He's a chatty fellow. Even when you're fighting him up there, all he wants to do is talk. He don't want to fight. Dude just doesn't want... Although he's always talking about fighting, I don't understand it. Anyway, Fragrant Lotus, Flying Snow. These two, they do quite a bit of damage. The one of them does a little whirlwind. And if that ends up in your ranged DPS or something like that, it can do some damage. It can. Fragrant Lotus is easily kiteable and easily tankable. Not too difficult. Flying Snow, obviously, when the whirlwind starts up, you want to move away. And that's that. I mean, they are just silly easy. There's nothing special about them. They don't even do too much damage or anything. But once you take them down, you got to wait for this little barrier to disappear. You can run up. You can start the fight against Snowdrift. And you can see at this point already, we've only got 4 minutes left on our time warp, which is ridiculous. I mean, it feels like I've been talking forever here already, but we're not even halfway through the instance. It's ridiculous. So with Snowdrift, as the tank, you want to just run up to the platform immediately. He despawns, he respawns, and you got to basically just tank him straight up in this first phase. When he casts his Fists of Fury, you got to move out of the way. He will destroy you and any other players in your party, if you stand in that, you just gotta move out of the way. It's pretty simple. Even if you get hit by like a split second of it, you should be okay. He does a funny little tornado kick, which you should, as a tank, just try and pull away from the rest of your party. Again, doesn't do that much damage. And then when you get him down to 50%, he switches to his second phase, which is where he puts a copy of himself in each corner of this room, in the 3 corners of the room, I guess. And only one of them is real. The others are fake. And when you, as a melee DPS or a tank, are up against this phase, then you should probably try and stand behind him. Unlike what I'm doing here, you can see every time he casts this little fist blast of his, it does a lot of damage to me. And the rest of our party members also taking damage, which is just not optimal. You shouldn't be taking damage from that because you can easily dodge them. And again, you can stand behind him, which 100% avoids it. So you can see that I found the real one here immediately. If it's the fake one, it'll die in 1 or 2 hits at most. And again, I wasn't standing behind him. If I did stand behind him, it would have been much better. And if you keep a slightly higher range, then you can easily see where those little fist fireballs are going. Now here, he's doing chase down, which is the final important ability that he does. He basically just runs after someone, and then he does that super cool looking wrestling move on them. Doesn't do much damage, easy to heal through, and that's the end of the fight. Once you're done there, you prepare for your invisibility run. I think this is where most people do their runs. I haven't seen anyone else doing runs anywhere else. I think that this just makes the most sense. There are different ways of doing this. We, once again, don't have a speed boost, so we can only go a certain distance here. And we also don't want to take too many chances when we're on the bridge here with where we're going to come out and, you know, how far we can actually get with our meager speed and invisibility potions. We were not in too much of a hurry here. We didn't try and hustle past the regenerating Shah and the little mini volatile energies. You could probably do it even if you didn't have a speed boost, if you cut some corners there. But it wasn't too much extra to kill, and we had a lot of time left. Still 10 minutes and 30 seconds left. Now, the regenerating Shah, you gotta interrupt him when he regenerates, obviously, else he doesn't die. And the volatile Shahs, the little ones, they do a lot of damage when they explode. It's actually really, really bad. So, if possible, you let the ranged DPS take them down. If you're melee, you stay far, far away from them. Then the destroying Shah, they are also, much like the regenerating Shah, just the kind of thing that you want to interrupt, stun, do whatever with, stop them from channeling their little destructive spells. They're not too difficult to deal with once again. In this situation, it's more the volatile energies, the little ones, that are actually taking your party down and doing the damage to you. Again, if you just use your cooldowns like the Ring of Frost, like Shadow Fury, we had them cycling nicely here. You can see the Shadow Fury came down just before the Ring of Frost, and just before those, I used my Blinding Light on them as well. But these guys are not too difficult to deal with. Again, try and just keep your distance from them. And again, in most of these challenge mode dungeons, ranged DPS, much, much better than melee DPS. It's just so much easier to handle, especially from a tanking and healing perspective. Now, when we took that group down there, we were already past our enemies, so we didn't really need to kill any more than just that. But we end up doing it anyway because there are mobs in the way. You'll see. Now, the next boss, Shah of Violence. He's got a couple of interesting abilities that are very much dependent on, I guess, personal skill and awareness. It's difficult. Okay, it's kind of difficult because you have to constantly keep moving, and I know if you're not like a hunter or whatever, that's a little bit difficult. It's difficult to keep moving the whole time and still do decent damage. And this guy you gotta take down quickly, but his abilities are Shah Spike, Disorientate and Smash, then he does a Smoke Blades whirling spin thing. You'll see it every now and then. The Shah Spikes, there it is, that's the one right there. The Shah Spikes, they are quite easy to dodge if you're watching your little timers up at the top of the screen there. So if you have Deadly Boss mods on, they basically cast, and the second they cast, there's actually a spike that comes out of the ground, and you can just move out of the way. So when you see it's about to cast, you just start moving until it's finished casting. It only casts on one random member of the party, so, you know, if you see it on someone else, you are safe. You don't have to worry. Disorientate and Smash basically just blinds one player, and that only lasts for like 2 to 3 seconds or 3 to 4 seconds, so it's not that bad. Obviously, you're not doing damage for that time, or you're not properly tanking for that time, so it can be bad if you don't deal with it. Now, the Smoke Whirlwind that he does, it puts a debuff on you that reduces your crit chance for a little while, but it also puts a buff on you, if I'm not mistaken, that also gives your next attack a 100% crit. It's weird. I don't quite understand that very well, but it does overall actually increase your DPS for a little bit, and because of that, this is the boss that we used Time Warp on. You'll see it was actually active there. The final ability that you gotta kind of watch out for, and that's kind of difficult to deal with as a healer, is the stack in magic debuff that he puts on you. You gotta dispel that as a healer, but at the same time, you don't want to dispel the buff slash debuff. I'm not sure what you'd even classify it as that gives you extra crit. So you just have to watch. You gotta selectively debuff as a healer. Now, this next part here is something that you can really cheat with quite easily, which we didn't do. We didn't cheat to our fullest here. Not proud of that. I would have loved to have cheated more, but the defenders that you gotta purify here, you can actually purify all 4 of them on this very first pull if you want. Now, you don't have to, because later on you're going to purify 1 more, but if you run in as a DPS and you click on the body to purify it at the same time as the other DPS do, so if 3 of you click on it at the same time, then all 3 of you get to purify that same body. So, you know, you get to actually skip a couple of these packs. Now, we didn't do it quite as much. We decided to just double purify the first one, purify the second one, and then purify the last one as well. You'll see that one in just a bit. I think in hindsight, it would have worked better if we just, like, triple purified the first one, or doubled and doubled. Anyway, back to the fight here. Zohee thought she had aggro here, and I think it's because of a Frost Nova that was used. So because of Frost Nova, she was standing right next to the mob. The mob attacked her, did some damage to her. She couldn't heal me. I died. It's a bit of a tragedy. You know, it happens. But Safflower got me up quick enough. It's great having Warlocks in your party. It really is. Those Soul Stones are just so useful. Also, in this specific situation, I think Paladin is probably the best possible tank, because Holy Wrath actually stuns all these mobs here. The Vestiges of Hatred for like 3 to 4 seconds. It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. It's just so good, because you got Blinding Flash, which stuns them. Then you got Holy Wrath, which stuns them. Then you got things like Shadow Fury and Ring of Frost. Stun them as well. It's good. You can just disable everything for the entirety of the fight, and that makes it a whole lot easier. So if you were doing this in heroic mode, you'd generally skip that pack, and in challenge modes, I think that also makes more sense. It would have been better to skip that previous pack and then just double purify this one up ahead here. This pull, however, is one that we wiped on once or twice. It was kind of difficult because of the amount of damage, and since doing this, I've learned a couple of new tricks. You can kill the Hateful Essences, both of them, without aggroing the pack. So you can have your ranged DPS kill those from, you know, all the way back there without pulling these mobs, and that helps a lot. That's a lot of damage that you reduce, and then you just get to focus on the mobs, purify, and so on and so forth. It'll make your run a lot easier, especially if you have high DPS, so you can get it down really quickly. You'll see there was a fear used there. I used my Blinding Flash. I obviously keep using Holy Wrath here. We just disable, interrupt, stun as much as we possibly can, and then, you know, the pack goes down relatively quickly. It's not too bad, but this is the last pack of trash that we do before the boss, and you can see we've got a decent amount of time left, but the boss itself, Taranzu at the end, he does have a lot of health. So he does take some time to go down. I don't know, I'd say if you have 3 minutes on the clock, when you get to this point, you'll take him down easily. You'd probably, if you had good enough DPS, be able to take him down with just 1 minute, maybe 1.5 minutes. That's very possible. I've seen some groups actually suicide at the end here. A couple of their members go and sit in those AoE spheres on the side there, kill themselves, res, buff up, and then they all use Time Warp again. It makes sense, you know, to get to kill the boss faster. But Taranzu, kind of simple, exactly the same as in Heroic once again, like most of the bosses. He summons Gripping Hatred around the area here. Your ranged DPS need to take those things down as quick as possible. I know some groups don't even bother with that, but we did. We took them down as quick as we could, and then they don't really pose a challenge when he grips you into them, and then obviously does a lot of damage to you. You also have this ability that just gets activated when you aggro the boss, which is called Meditate or something, and you have to cleanse your hatred on this fight. I mean, if you let it go up too high, you're gonna die, you're gonna lose. It's just not gonna work out for you. And you can choose specific times to do that. If I'm not mistaken, you can use that to root yourself in the ground. It's again something I learned after we did this boss. You can meditate at the exact time that he grips you into the grip in hatred, and then you'll be rooted into the ground and he won't be able to grip you in. You'll obviously take 0 damage, you will cleanse your hatred, and everything will just work out better. You'll see here we got gripped around twice only, and the last grip in hatred we landed in was killed just as we landed in it, so it wasn't really that big a deal. But the boss itself, if you come in composed and ready, shouldn't be too difficult, because for the most part he's busy doing things that don't really do damage, and some of his abilities can even be interrupted, which is, again, obviously something your DPS should try and do as often as humanly possible. Finally, he does a Sharp Blast, which just knocks you back into his little ring of corrupted shadow orbs, and then does some damage to you. Not a big deal at all. You can just basically heal through it. It does more damage to melee DPS. I've done this with a rogue in our group as well, and that was slightly more difficult. You know, it is more difficult for the healer in that case, and if you just have range DPS, then it's also much easier to take down the grip in hatred that spawn around the room. But that's it. That's gold on Shado-Pan Monastery. It wasn't an amazing time. It wasn't that quick, and this was actually where Jemma got her 9 out of 9 done. She had done 1 or 2 of the others before us, so everyone said grats to her, and afterwards we ran to the shrine with her to look at her fancy, shiny new armor. It's kinda cool. I think you'll see in the next video she'll have it on. But there you go. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them. I would love to answer them for you about this instance, about the challenge modes in general, or anything else. Check back here soon for more. Give this one a like, share it, and say grats to Jemma. Although this was like 2 months ago or something, say grats to her anyway, because it's a nice feeling getting them all done. So there you go again. Happy that.